Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Black Lawyers Podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of interviewing Yoshi Haney from Law School Mentor Program. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Great, great. So, Yoshi is an amazing corporate attorney. He's out of Chicago. This is our special bar exam episode. I don't think me and Yoshi want to talk about the bar exam, but I feel compelled to do a bar exam episode for each season that we have because this is the Black Lawyers Podcast and we want more Black lawyers. We only have, as you know, I stated on this podcast a million times, less than 5% of lawyers are Black. So the way we get that number up is not only do we get Black lawyers in law school, but we get them to pass the bar exam. They have to pass the bar exam. That is the final step in putting Esquire behind your name. So I couldn't think of a better person than Yoshi, who has this amazing law school mentor program. He's online where you can find that on Instagram. I'll let him tell you a little bit more about that later. But first, before we get into some bar exam tips. I make all my guests play a round of legal hot topics, so Yoshi is no different. So we'll get started. So our first topic is Donald Trump trying to dismantle the Department of Education, and essentially the judges blocking it. They're like, absolutely not. And if you recall, probably since the inauguration, I want to say his first 60 days in office, he went in with Elon Musk and others to dismantle some of our fundamental institutions, literally getting rid of whole departments, whole agencies, rifting thousands of federal employees. And so the Department of Education, he had his eyes set on getting rid of it and returning it, um, essentially probably to the states. I think that was his original plan, kind of how he returned Roe versus Wade, got rid of a federal abortion legislation and gave it back to the states. He says, okay, I'm going to give it back to the states. But I'm sure Yoshi can speak to this. Depending on where you live in the United States, you may not want your state in charge of what you are learning and the standard of what you're learning. Because again, depending on where you live, if you're really far south or maybe in the middle of nowhere, you may not learn at the level you should, and you may not receive the well-rounded education that you should receive. And so, of course, people were against that. And the judges, which I think at this point are saving us, our judges are literally saving America right now. This was one of the things they did block. So I just wanted to hear quickly your thoughts on both sides of the argument about returning it to the states and the judge's ultimate decision to block it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for having me. I admire the work you're doing. I come from a journalism background, so I get what it takes to interview and pull out the necessary and relevant parts from people. But it's interesting. I'm not a litigator, and I'm also make sure that I give this is not the views of my firm that I represent, et cetera, et cetera. But I think for me, education has always been sort of that key to unlocking a lot of the barriers that we as first generation types of individuals, minorities have always sort of faced. And I think just to put it back in the States, we already kind of see, in different laws of, even abortion, things are happening in Georgia, things are happening in Texas, just the extremities and like how extreme some of the states can act, which is sort of, I think, just a little bit scary, specifically like, places like Florida, where, they're trying to erase a lot of our history. They're trying to erase, the curriculum of, making people aware of what's happened, or at least putting it in a way that I think is one-sided, or just telling the story that they want to perpetuate. And I think that's just a way of control. Like it once for us, I've heard it all the time. It's just like certain things you hide them in books. And I think for us, it's so critical for us to take sort of the initiative to one fight back. But I mean, I think just to your point, the national versus state argument. I mean, there's no uniformity then of just what type of education our citizens are getting. And I think in that way, I think like our immediate next steps is even just looking at what next year looks like and wondering if there's even going to be like sufficient staff and like student programming for even the next year, which of course will then hinder long term. And I mean, for the generation of kids and our youth to be the next up, and you just spoke about the 5%, and you spoke about all these different things. I just think like this is It's a very scary time, like, it's a very fragile time, and I think for us, it's, we gotta do something in order to make sure that we're, filling in the gaps and making sure that our kids and our youth are being educated.
Absolutely, absolutely. Which transitions nicely to our second hot topic. Harvard University, most predominantly white institutions, we call them PWIs. Obviously, there is the main graduation that everyone participates in, but sometimes the Office of African American Affairs will have its own graduation to highlight the Black students at these particular schools, just to give them more of a celebration and more of a highlight. I think some people in the comments were a little confused when they're like, Black graduations. Wait a minute, they're making the Black people go to a different graduation. So, no, no, no. Let me be clear. They are allowed to go to the regular graduation, the Black graduation again. It's just something in addition to the main graduation that's happening. But back to Trump, because it always goes back to Trump at this point for the next 4 years. It's what I call the trickle down effect. So because he's being allowed to remove DEI across the board, especially from places like Harvard, institutions that have now sued him for from removing funding and forcing them to remove certain DEI things in their programming, then you get cuts to things like the Black graduation at Harvard, where Black students who, again, really overcame the odds to not only get into school but to graduate, special acknowledgments like that, that's considered DEI, it's removed. And so just wanted to hear your thoughts on how it looks like the faculty came together maybe with their own money and they still had the Black graduation anyway.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's this argument of like segregation by race. But I mean, so I guess on both sides, right? That's the argument is that, we're sort of perpetuating segregation
Mhm.
by, hosting these types of things. And I think it wasn't just the Black graduation, like it was like all affinity-based groups, if I'm not
Okay.
mistaken.
Okay.
But it was the Black graduation that just like continued on. And so I think like it just speaks so much power to how much like community matters while you're doing something like this, like
Mhm.
seeing ourselves in a community, it just creates a very lasting and I think overall like a very concrete image of what success can look like when we have communities that show us through just the image of access what
Mhm.
success looks like.
Mhm.
Having and it's one thing. I was just at BESLA, Black Entertainment Sports Law Association in Atlanta at mid-year, and one of the guest speakers, Lil John, was basically like, how do we, in this era specifically, and the Trump era, and just like in a very divisive era, like how do we continue to have each other's backs? And I think we have to do a better job of that. You
Mhm.
spoke on the percentages and the statistics, and if
Mhm.
we're gonna even remotely increase those statistics, it's like we got to have our own backs. So it's like I think this is a time while there's a lot of divisiveness, it's like
Mhm.
got to create a stronger community. And I really love what the Harvard educators and like just the faculty did by having each other's back. And I think it became even more powerful. Like I've seen a lot of posts about it, and it probably just created a stronger community. And I think for Lawyer Bay and just like all the things you're doing and Law School
Mhm.
Mentor, it's like it's almost like this is the most imperative time, especially if like a lot of bolsters are going to be cut from campuses, if there's going to
Mhm.
be no funding to create this sort of community in a world where we already sort of feel out of place.
Mhm.
Like it's going to be super imperative to have these types of organizations that step in during a time like this.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, that is the round of hot topics. I kind of let you off easy because they were
Please,
more
please,
steered
please.
towards education.
And
I usually really have people in the hot seat, so Yoshi got off easy. But no, those were great answers. We appreciate like your insight and into these matters because, like I said, I mean, it hasn't even been 6 months. We have 3.5 more years of this, and then, like you said, looking to who can be considered our leader in the next 4 years. Like these are the conversations we have to have now. I think the Democrats realize that they also had that conversation too late, and also presenting the candidate that really most Americans will choose, not one particular demographic. Unfortunately, that's how you win. so so yeah, so it should be interesting to see how the Trump administration continues to play out with his various executive orders that he essentially tries to use to unilaterally do what he wants to do. Big shout out to the judges that um, remember that we have a three-party system, our judicial, our executive, and our legislative. Like, there's a reason why we have a three-party system, to balance the powers, to make sure not one branch is just doing whatever they want. And so thank God for the Constitution as it relates to that. And so yes, we'll continue to see how that plays out.
Absolutely.
So anyway, thank you again for playing Hot Topics. Before we jump into some bar exam tips, I did want to just ask a few questions about you. Obviously, some people already know you on Instagram. You have a really good Instagram presence, on your personal page, but also through the Law School Mentor Program. But for those that don't know you, why did you originally decide to go to law school? What made you say law school versus maybe med school or any other school? Like, why law school?
So, I mean, originally I didn't have it wasn't in my cards from like birth. I don't have that story of like
Hmm.
I always knew from a kid, like, nah, I didn't.
Uh-huh.
Um, my mom knew more than I did. She thought I would be like a judge or something, but I kind of being defiant, I was like, I'm gonna play sports. My dad played in the minors. I'm like, I'm gonna go play baseball. And
Oh,
if I
wow.
can't talk, like if I can't play sports, I'm gonna talk about sports. So I was a journalist major. So I went to University of
Mm.
Missouri. I'm like, you know what? Like, it's a great journalism school, but that's also just gonna be my backup plan. And as I progressed throughout undergrad, like I actually kind of hated it. Like,
Mm.
of course, you can go right into sports. I'll report on everything like NPR radio, just the news, breaking news, and then like eventually you get into the niche of sports. But I mean, it was just so much work for little reward. And for
Mm.
me, I just felt like my potential was being in a way stifled.
Mhm.
Because if I was gonna pursue a career in journalism, I'd have to start my career at a small market like Pine Bluff,
Mhm.
Arkansas, or like,
Yep. Yep.
I'm not doing that. And on top of that, like my senior year in college was riddled by racial tension. So it's funny we're talking about all this, but we had KKK popping up on campus because, at the University of Missouri, fall 2015, a lot of racial tension happened. Long story short, student body president, black gay man was spit on walking downtown.
Wow.
The grad students did a hunger strike and was like, until
Wow.
we get a response, because they didn't respond to the grievance at all.
Wow. Wow.
So they were like, well, hunger strike, grad student, went like 6 days. Nobody responded to anything was going to let this man die. I was getting a lot of attention at this point.
Oh, wow.
So the football team stepped in and was like, we're not going to play our next game unless the UM system president resigns. So that was like a whole big thing. Spike Lee's down there. Like, so I'm with the national networks. I'm like, this is the taste of what I would be doing.
Hmm.
And I still couldn't tell a lot of the angles that I wanted to. So I kind of just felt like, my potential was like I can't just tell the story. I got to impact the story in some way. So I'm meeting with lawyers at the time. I'm first generation. I always know I go back to school, but it just showed me how flexible the degree was.
Hmm.
Did a little bit more research, took a year off, worked at a law firm. Even was told then like you shouldn't go to law school. It's oversaturated. So much loans. Like
Hmm.
this is not a great time. And I'm just like, well, where are the people who make this like look lit? And so just
Hmm.
like seeking that type of stuff out, like the Lorans of the world, people who make like being a lawyer seem not just cool, but like the influence behind it. And then for the culture, I mean, it's like, I had a mentor tell me if you want to go be a doctor, you go to med school, but if you want to do anything else, you go to law school. So that's just how flexible, you know, how valuable the degree is. So I went full in. I was super unorganized. So we were talking about like preparing for exams and stuff like that. Like LSAT, I was not prepared. I self-studied. I took it 2 times. I was like, you know what? This is not new material. I'm just gonna wing it. I got into like one school. I applied on the deadline of like all apps when they were due. But I only needed one opportunity, and I really like put my studies first. I really like went head first and did really, really well in law school.
What
Graduated.
what law school did you go to again?
I went to the University of Illinois in Chicago,
Oh,
was now
Chicago.
the University of Illinois Chicago, but
Mhm.
back then was called John Marshall in Chicago.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so it
Okay.
was my 3L year. I was student body president. We let them through the merger or really the acquisition, if I'm being honest. And for me, it's like my license, I've always believed in myself, like my license looks just like Harvard's. And so I didn't need to, after my first year, I could have transferred to the Northwesterns, the Yales, whatever the case may be, because I had really good grades. But I just kind of bet on myself. And so I ended up landing at one of the top 10 firms, right out of law school. And I really haven't looked back since then. A huge part of my journey has been like, well, you went from a non-top 100 law school to the top 10 firm. How'd you do it? So I really created and, fell in love with, of course, helping people, mentoring people. So I created a nonprofit called the Law School Mentor, which raises now first generation students through mentorship, access, resources, and we replicated that same system now on the med side because shout out to my younger brother, he just graduated from med school, so he's going to be a resident University of Chicago. So two, Black boys, just opening up the doors for hopefully generations to come through law and medicine.
Oh, amazing. Your mama should be so proud. Is it just two of you?
There's two of us. Two.
Oh my gosh, she got a doctor and lawyer. What did she do in her other past life to get that? So, big shout outs to mom and me. Obviously, you guys are doing the hard work, but that's amazing that she got a doctor and a lawyer. That's really rare to have that amongst siblings. And I love that you have this kind of um, other program for mentors in the medical field, kind of companion mentor program alongside what you're doing in the legal field. I think that's amazing. Now, you said you did really well in law school. What was your favorite class? And what was the class maybe you didn't like so much?
I hated con law.
Hated Kamala. Okay, that's a typical answer. I realize how important it is now. I think I realize how important it is now, and I get now as a lawyer, I get now why con law was so important, but back then, yeah, that was a very difficult course to navigate. And then, what was your favorite class?
Well, it's funny, like you're asking me about all these constitutional issues, and I'm like, wow, like this is just haunting me at this point. And of course, studying for the bar, because we're about to talk about that too, is just
Mhm,
like it's just con law. There's no real answers. It's like everything's gray. Like
mhm,
you operate
mhm.
in the gray, right? Like
Yes,
going off
yes,
a document that was drafted in 1700, which is honestly crazy to me.
yes.
Um,
Hmm.
my favorite class, I don't even know if it really counts as a class. Like for me, it was more of like the practical side of things, like doing a clinic and having my own clients that I could
Oh, nice, nice.
and work
Okay.
with their businesses. And so it really, I really shout out to Renee Hatcher, who's the clinic professor over there, because she took her platform and the ability to help all these small Black businesses around Chicago. And
Mhm,
so we have myself and all of our counterparts representing businesses in Inglewood, which are like, in the hood of Chicago. And so it's not only teaching them business and how to represent clients, but also like social economic, like lower tier type of businesses that
mhm,
really, one, you're now talking about how to communicate to different types of individuals, but then two, people with less business acumen. And I think it was just a tremendous experience, and gave me the opportunity to, like I said, just sort of have my own like workload and client load at that time.
yeah, that's amazing. You mentioned in your undergrad you had this racial tension kind of coming right out of school, and believe it or not, and maybe you didn't look at it this way, but I'm very good at looking from the outside in. I kind of think that happening in your last year planted a seed. Not that you necessarily do criminal justice or anything like that, but I do think when you're in real situations where the law impacts something that you are involved in, it does give you that legal bug. And so I think it was very fitting that that kind of happened when you were trying to decide what direction you were going to go into. So yeah, I just wanted to make that note because like a light bulb went off when you said that because you weren't really thinking about necessarily going down that path. But I wanted to know in law school, since we are talking about less than 5% of the legal profession being Black, did you face any adversities at your law school? Or was your school one that embraced students of color?
So I will say, I think the practice of law and the environment of law brings all different types of challenges in it. So
Hmm.
my school specifically, I mean, I think there were times where, we're advocating for certain programs. There were definitely some times where like, things happen with Bolsa, or like, for example, there was a situation, I remember being like on the exec board of Bolsa, and one of the teachers used, and this is like the George Floyd era, and
Hmm.
just like I think they used the N word on the exam.
Wow, interesting. Okay.
It was like a freedom of speech thing and all this other stuff.
But still, yeah,
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah.
So it was
You could have
it was triggering to some
could have
people.
maybe put some asterisks with it. I don't know.
Exactly. Exactly. Or just, and it was just like a awareness, like a situational awareness thing. And it's
Yeah,
like some things that, if you don't have the right checks and balances in place, it's just like, that's why representation is so important. Because if I had been in the meeting, with them or whatever the case
right.
may be, like,
Exactly.
or at least having those type of representation, you would have easily been able to be like, nah, I don't think that's smart. And so that, stuff like that has happened. I mean, I've of course been in the legal field and dressed up in
Right.
a suit, and they're, heading into court, shadowing someone or whatever the case may be, and they're trying to tell you, well, what court, like, what case are you here for, as
Mhm.
like the defendant.
Spend it.
Um, yeah, so I mean, it's been like stuff like that, but I will
Yeah.
say that USC is like probably one of the more diverse law schools.
Mhm.
And so I think even in that regard, community has always been huge. And so it's always great to find yourself in a community of people that not only look like you, but share in a lot of the same experiences and background.
Yeah, absolutely. You've already answered my question about like what how you feel like we can increase the 5%. I think that was a great answer at the top during Hot Topics. You talked about us just having our own backs. Like that's how you do it. You have the Black Lawyers Podcast, you have the Law School Mentor Program, you have events, you have things where community can come together. And like you said, someone, believe it or not, is looking at you and saying, "He makes lawyering looking cool, look cool. Let me maybe look into it." You have students right now in high school and college trying to decide. And don't get me wrong, I think it's great to be a content creator, online influencers, but I think like at this point, you can actually be a professional and that. You don't have to just be a content creator, influencer. And you actually kind of have to go viral to even really make a decent amount of money off of it in the first place. And so I
Right.
hate that this generation thinks that that's all they really need to do. I know it's a very easy barrier to entry. There's no real barrier to entry. Oh, you need a phone, you don't need a lot of money. And I understand, going to law school or even med school, because med school, less than 5% of doctors are Black there too. Sometimes they're like, well, why would I do all that? Why would I do all that? And I'm like, because at some point, me and Yoshi are gonna retire. Like, we gotta have somebody to replace us. So
Right.
we're gonna have to have another group. And so I definitely feel like us having our own backs and being really visible, like how we're doing here through our various programs and platforms, is definitely the way to do it. Before we get into the do's and don'ts of the bar exam, um, would if someone wanted to know exactly how the law school mentoring program works, what are the steps? And I mean, I know you have the Instagram page. Do you go to a website? Do you sign up for a mentor? What are the steps if a student or a lawyer mentor wants to get involved? Both ways.
For sure. So
Hmm.
there's a few different programs. I like to think of them in, sort of three different pillars. One of which is the organic mentorship that I realized that I've been in part of so many different organizations and just overall programs where they pair you with a mentor. And while I think that's helpful, I think there's a lot of times where, organic relationships are the ones that last the longest. So we've wanted to create a community of individuals. I have now, for the last 4 or 5 years, taken about 15 or so students every year, taking them under my wing, mentor them for 6 months, exposing them to all the things and how to survive, and not only just survive, but thrive in law school. And then they've all, joined me to be mentors for me on my behalf. So for the last 5 years, I have about 75 or so mentors. If you go to lawschoolmentor.com, the mentors tab, all of them are accessible. You shoot them an email. You can go on their LinkedIn, see what type of experience they have, where they are, and then just like with a click of a button, set up a meeting with them. We also have a mentorship intake coordinator if you're not the type of person who can knock on a door like that virtually, and I get it. It's kind of daunting, especially if you're a pre-law student. You can meet with our mentorship intake coordinator, and based off of your preferences and your background, she can also pair you with a host of different individuals. We also, for our lawyers, access is huge. So do something similar to this. We've had a virtual coffee talk series for the last like 4 years or so. I've probably done over 100 myself. My team
Mhm.
has done over 100, from the lawyers at Netflix and sport agents and entertainment lawyers and just all of the above,
Mhm.
partners and judges. They all come on, share their experience, and then you get a chance to tap in over Instagram Live and ask questions in live time. And then, of course, each one of them have, graciously agreed to be accessible after the talk. So they have
Mhm.
a way to contact them. And then lastly, we have a legal summit that we throw every year.
Hmm.
preparing people, specifically for, entering 1Ls. And that'll be like 12 hours worth of programming, but anyone can attend. Like youngest in attendance last year was a sophomore in high school. We had
Hmm.
about 55 or so attendees. My law firm hosted it. We had like LeBron James Media Council, like as a fireside chat, and
Hmm.
mock classes and blue booking and exam writing and just all the things you need to be successful in law school. Um, so those are like the three pillars. We do a lot of networking events, et cetera. But yeah, if you go to the website, you meander around there. You can also set up a meeting with myself or the 75 other mentors that we have on the website, and then of
Hmm.
course attend whatever events that we host to hopefully give you an exposure of what it looks like to be a lawyer and how to thrive in this field.
Great, great. Well, I definitely know after this episode, people will definitely be looking into that because, like I said, it is important for us to have a community around us to get us ready for law school, help us excel in law school, and then, like I said, pass the bar exam. Hence why we're here today. This episode that we do each year is to help in that effort. So we are going to play a game of do and don'ts. Obviously, if it's a do, say if it's a do. If it's a don't, it's a don't. Um, about just some things that I kind of recall, people being on both sides of the coin about in terms of like bar prep. I'll remind the audience, but we do have on the blacklawyers.com a bar exam pass kit on the website that gives you resources to help you pass the bar exam. So that's something digital you can download right from the blacklawyers.com website. That also includes some of these tips that we're going to discuss right now. So we'll see Roshi's perspective. We'll see how much we agree, we don't agree. So the first one is, should you study, with a uh, coach, or should you study like with an actual like class?
Yeah. Well, I can just say what I did. Well, first of all, for background, I did pass the bar on the first time.
Okay.
Also, I think all of advice is subjective. Like what you learn in law
Yes.
school is that you got to know yourself. You got to know yourself more than anything.
Right.
You learn the means in which you learn, like what doesn't work for you, what works. So take everything with a grain of salt. But I think that's
Mhm.
important of finding like mentors who you see yourself in and you sort of resonate with. So to answer your question, I definitely would say you need a course.
Mhm.
However, I do think that like with the overwhelming amount of information that's presented to you, you need to like have an attack plan. So you need to have like either someone who can advise you on how to attack the material, because I think just taking the course itself, theme is Barbary. I've seen plenty of people, specifically people who look like myself and you, who don't pass on the first time because they take the exam, they do everything that they're sort of asked, but they don't know how to study. So it's
Mhm.
a ton of information. It's like you have to sort of reformulate how your brain works because it goes from you're trying to ace your exams to now a test of minimal competence. And like
Mhm.
to me, that was like the hardest part because I've never had to just shoot for like a 66 or 70% or something like that.
Right.
So it's like that's a whole different mindset. And you could be scoring like 50s, 60s, but for like 3 weeks before the exam, and it's a mental thing more than anything. And so like just making sure that you stay on the right course, having someone you can check in with. I would say you kind of need both, specifically if you don't have a blueprint on like people who've passed the bar exam before, you can't go into the cold and expect that, oh, I got a course and the course will be enough. I think
Mhm.
some of that has to be on the preparation of how to attack the materials as well, at the very least.
Mhm. Okay. Do or don't do a study group.
I wasn't a fan. I'm not a fan of study groups. I think I would use study groups like I would use supplements. I think a
Okay.
lot of people use supplements as like their backbone or their foundation of their material, when in reality, you had to use your teacher and your
Mhm.
textbook as the foundation and everything else to supplement that. Because, for example, I had a torts teacher who taught negligence in 5 elements instead of four, which is how
Mm.
most people learn them. And
Mm.
if I had chosen to supplement because I'm like, I'm not gonna pay attention to him, like I'm just gonna learn it on my own time, I probably would
Mhm.
have failed the exam. So it's
Mhm.
like, so for me, I also have a horror story with study. So maybe that I'm a little
So
biased.
for you, you're like, well, if it was personally me, it would be a don't, but maybe just treat it as a supplement. Okay, that's
Supplements,
that's good. Okay. Do or do not work during studying for the bar exam?
Yo, like the personal, I mean, hey, if you got to do what you got to do. I know some people who you can't afford to not work. Now, we'll put you on game if you have not started law school. If you're in law school, you can get a job who's going to give you a stipend and pay you to study. You know,
Okay.
so working at a top 10 law firm, like they paid me like $10,000 over the course of 2 months to
Wow.
take the exam, and they paid for my bar course. So it's just like I didn't have to work.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I don't think that's everyone's, but
Right.
it does cost $1,000 to take the exam. So if we don't get it the first time, then you're
Got to keep paying that $1,000 until you pass, and that's on
$1,000.
top of your study materials or coach or
That's right.
the
And now you're
course.
taking away your time, your energy. It's like you have so much information. I couldn't even imagine doing an arduous job and then coming home and
Yeah,
studying because I was
I'm gonna say it's a don't.
listen,
Borrow. Look,
if you can help it,
fine. Look, fine. Maybe you don't need $10,000. Maybe you need $6,000 to live for 60 days. Ask everybody for a $50 to $250 donation until you get to $6,000 and take the 60 days off. Trust me. That to me, it's a don't. I know some people like, let me just try to see. Again,
nah,
some
if
people
you can
now
help it.
I do know people if they're taking maybe their second, third, or fourth exam, maybe they're working by that point and they just fit it in and whatever. Because at that point they're a lawyer, they're licensed with their one state, whether
Right.
they pass the other state or not. So I think if you've already passed one, maybe. But if it's your first one, I'm sorry, it's a don't. I think it's better for you to try to like figure out how to like, borrow the money.
Mhm.
Um, do or don't with um us like cards, like study cards. Should you do are those cards like helpful? Sometimes people take all this time to actually put everything on cards. I don't know if is that helpful. Do you think it could be
I,
helpful?
I think definitely make your own outlines for
Okay.
sure because for me, it was like trying to go from one material to another or like pre-branded cards. Like it didn't really work because they're saying things differently. And now you're trying to memorize things and you're kind of getting caught up. Like you need to be in a succinct way of memorization. But I'll
Mm,
even take it one step further. Like for me, I use flashcards and outlines.
mm,
But I made an auditory outline. So like
Did you
I
go to
made
sleep with it?
it sleep
Someone said to sleep with it.
washing
So
dishes.
Judge Lauren Lake, that was I don't know how we even got on the bar exam. But paternity court judge Lauren Lake, who I interviewed a couple of episodes back, she said she would actually sleep to it. She would go to the pool. She would listen to it. And
Damn.
again, everybody is a different learner. So if you learn by listening, that's excellent. But also if you make your own cards and you learn by writing things down, again, I think to Yoshi's point, you have to know what type of learner you are. Do or don't start a do or don't start a new relationship while starting to study the bar. That's like that's probably like an
Is there a
episode for another day.
hell
But
no?
anyway,
Is there a hell no button?
is it a do or don't to talk to people on the day of the exam?
I
This is whether
love
you know the people or not.
that's right. I first of all, I am a people person. I love joking. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna keep it light. We're not talking about a thing that we just did, but we can definitely crack some jokes. So it just really depends on the type of person you
Well,
are.
that was my next question. So you say, okay, you can talk to people. You don't have to be like a weirdo and just like be in a corner.
Right.
But you're saying don't talk about. That was my next one. Don't talk about the exam because people.
Absolutely.
Let me tell you what they'll do. Oh,
Right.
what did you write for this? What did you write? Oh, I wrote this, and then you're like, Dad, I didn't write that.
That's right.
And then you're second guessing yourself going into the second half. Like whatever you did in the first half, it is done. It is done.
Over with.
You cannot undo it. You cannot undo it. Um, Similarly, should you bring? Is it a do or don't to bring your lunch? Because if you don't bring your lunch, you got to go somewhere and get it and come back. What do you think about like? Because you're gonna have like a mid session, so
Yeah, bring it for sure. Bring something that, is not gonna that you need to warm up and et cetera, et cetera. Like, some light and I mean you're gonna be done soon enough. You can reward yourself,
mhm,
but for me, definitely you want to be prepared. Anything can happen. Like I think the
mhm,
day I went, my computer like crashed out. So it was just like,
mhm. Acting like my computer today that I think got wet. I think I had like a water bottle, like an exercise water bottle. I had what is I'm pushing the power button, like what is going on? I'm like, you never know, like literally life will life sometimes.
Life all the
And you
time.
cannot control it. You got to be able to pivot. I said, oh, this record's on cloud. Let me just jump on the, let me use my phone to do this today.
That's right.
I was like, really getting ready to spin. But yeah, leading up to the exams, sometimes things are out of your control. And so you want to be able to pivot. So yeah, I wouldn't go too far off campus trying to eat somewhere. Just bring your lunch. Um, do or don't study in between your morning and afternoon session, even just like your little cards really quick. No, why not?
I'm not a proponent of that or the day before. Like at
Okay,
that
that was my next question. So answer both. Why don't study in between sessions, even little flashcards? You don't think so? And then tell me why you also don't think you should study before, because that was my next one. Why not?
if you don't got it by then, like you're just gonna stress yourself out even more. It's like you're gonna be like hyper focused on like trying to remember this. And I just think right, you just gotta, like breathe through it. It's a mental test more than
It
anything.
really is. You already know all the information. It's
Yeah,
more of a mental test than an actual do you know the information test,
yeah,
because you've learned all the information in the last 3 years. It's not like you're going to get to the exam and see something that you've never seen before. That's not going to happen. So
right, right.
that's not going to happen. Which leads me to some. So thank you for playing do's and don'ts. So which leads me to some general tips, and you can obviously give me any others that come to mind before we close out. But some general tips for multiple choice. If you are running out of time, choose a letter. I don't care what the letter is. I personally choose B, but it could be C, it could be D. Fill out the remaining, but it has to be the same exact letter, because statistically, some of those are going to be right. So
Mhm.
pick a letter towards the end. If you look at the time, you got like 10 minutes left. You don't think you have enough time to answer. Just fill that out. Trying to think in terms of your essays, please put something down on the paper. And remember, you have issue, rule, application, conclusion. So even if the rule is wrong, if you're halfway trying to apply the facts somewhat to a rule that's somewhat adjacent to what you're supposed to be talking about, they're going to give you some points. So IRAC will never fail you. Issue, rules, application, and conclusion for your essays. And also just never just like not put anything down on the paper, even if you're like, oh, I can't remember this exact rule. And a lot of times you sometimes don't even have to know the name of the rule. If you explain what the rule is, they'll still give you points. But yeah, don't leave anything blank with the multiple choice. Please put something on the paper with the essay. um and then I was going to ask you, and I know it's been a while, you passed the first time. Do you recall how many multiple choice questions you did in a 60-day period? And like, if you were to give someone like a window of like, you need to at least do this many questions to feel somewhat prepared, what would you think would
Yeah, so
be?
I was like kind of like a freak about preparing for this. Like I was like, okay, I need to ask people who passed. I need to
Okay,
ask people who didn't pass. I
right.
need to ask people who still haven't passed. Like, what's happening here? Like, and I would compile all the information before going into it. And I really felt like the sweet spot, like people told me adaptive art, so I really, of course, suggest that. But it was like the sweet spot was at least like 2,000 multiple choice questions. So it was like, and again, knowing yourself,
Hmm.
I started a little bit earlier. I
Hmm.
watched a lot of the content before I finished. And so by that
Yeah,
time, I wasn't like stressed. Like it's so much information. So
yeah,
like knowing yourself, I knew I wanted to take some breaks between.
right,
So I
right.
started a little bit earlier. Um,
Yeah, I definitely think too. I always tell people at least 2,000 to 2,500. Like, to know that, because here's the thing, they can only ask the question but so many ways.
that's
The
right.
people that make this exam. So if you at least do 2,000 questions before the exam, you're going to see some variation of that.
Mhm.
That is why people are like, why so many? I'm like, because we want to make sure that you see kind of every variation. They can only ask it so many ways. In terms of how many sit down, like complete beginning to end, like you said, you do it how you train. How many sit down full exams should you do? Like 2 or 3? Like how many in a 60-day period before you actually sit for the exam? So again, you can simulate the experience.
I don't know. I'm kind of crazy. I feel like for me, like 2 weeks leading up to it, I was taking like almost a bar a day. Yeah, and the reason why that was is because like
Wow.
stamina wise, I felt like if I could get up past the point, then I wouldn't, of course, when pressure hits, like the week leading up, I took it off. Like I took a
Hmm.
lot more off, but like
Right.
the the way I was practicing was like if I can sit for a little bit longer than what I'm gonna be needed, then
Mhm.
like that's gonna feel shorter and it's gonna give me the opportunity. So I would always practice harder. Like even when I was in law school, I had, a coach or someone who was basically like helping my 1L year, and she would give me like exams, practice exams over stuff I hadn't even learned yet.
Mm.
So it was like, you're gonna have a time in your life, specifically probably on the bar, where you're not gonna remember rules. This is gonna be foreign to you, so you can't freak out. Like, what's gonna happen? So you might as
Right.
well get used to learning how to write to a style, learning how to write organized enough, and
Right.
coming up with at
You
least
literally get points for organization, even if you
actually.
get the rule wrong or if you get the rule right and you don't apply it right. Like you get points for that. And remember, this is an attorney who's probably kind of tired. They may be having a good day or a bad day when they grade your exam. So the least you can do is make it super clean, make sure your handwriting is decent if you're not typing it, making sure it's super organized because they are going to appreciate that you at least did that. And it's a mental thing, but I swear your points are higher when it's more
Mhm.
organized. Just because they have so many exams, they're not just grading your exam; they get a certain amount. So keep that in mind. Keep your grader in mind. That's something I had to learn later when I took multiple exams for different states. That like keep your bar exam grader in mind. Is there any other tip? Because I mean, you're super disciplined. I don't think people gonna be as disciplined as you listening to this. I mean, we're gonna have a few,
All
but
right.
let's just say people that are maybe like you're at 100. I think most people are probably at 75 to 80, right? Because they really want to pass, so they're not under 50, but they might not quite be at your level. Like, other than is there anything else that come to mind that maybe you did in addition to taking, beginning to end, taking multiple complete exams, doing at least 2,000 questions? Was there anything else that kind of stood out in your bar exam prep experience that you felt like just allowed you? Because all you got to do is pass. You don't have to. I keep telling people you ain't got to have the high score. You
Mhm.
just need to pass.
Mhm.
So, do you recall anything else in your experience where?
I mean, I think like I said, your mental is just like so important. Like you
Mhm.
have to eliminate all the things that are gonna damage that. Like that could be
Okay.
relation. That could
Mhm.
be the fact that like you have so much pressure coming from family. That could be like someone or is doubting you, you're doubting yourself. Like you have to eliminate all things that prevent you from doing the work. The bar
Okay.
exam, I know plenty of people who are dumber than me, who have passed the bar exam, and people who are smarter than me who did not pass the bar exam. So I don't think it's a matter of how smart you are. It's the amount of people who put in the actual work. And so I would also suggest like there's small tips like, even practicing typing. Like the person who types the fastest is going to put more on paper. So
Mhm.
like, stuff like that, like those are the things that people don't necessarily talk about.
Mhm.
And I would just encourage you to like really work on over the course of what's before you graduate law school. You work on your discipline, you work on the things that strengthen your mental, like if that's meditating, if that's stretching, like all that stuff. Wellness is a huge part of this. So it's like
Mhm.
you can't just put in all work and not like put the sort of, I think, the strategies and just sort of the overall things in play that make sure that you protect your mental, your emotional, so that you can
Mhm.
perform physically well. Um,
Yeah.
Outside of that,
Yeah.
I mean, really just putting in, like, you really just got to put in the work. Like, there's
You
no,
start putting the work. There's really, I mean, unfortunately, you can listen to this episode and all the other bar exam episodes. You can download again the bar pass kit on theblacklawyers.com. We can give you all the resources. We can tell you get a coach. You can make but just the fact that Yoshi put an audio outline together, that was work. He had to sit up there, create the script for it, and take the time to sit and read it so that he could have it for future studies. Like, you have to put in the work. And even if you don't do that, but I just feel like that's a good example of you were like, no, I'm going to put in the work. I'm only going to do this one time. I'm not going to keep taking this exam. I'm not going to keep spending this, $1,000. So yeah, I just think you also maybe just have to ask yourself how bad do you want to pass how bad do you want to pass the first time around, right? And so keep that all in mind. We always close out with our Black Excellence Moment of the Week, and our Black Excellence Moment um, of the week goes to Quinta Brunson. She is the producer and actress on Abbott Elementary.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and so yeah, she actually got the key to the city for Philadelphia for her school. Uh, Andrew Hamilton, the Andrew Hamilton School, her former school. They gave her the key to the city, but they also put a mural. They also put a mural um, on the wall of her elementary school, which I think is really, really cool. And so, yeah, shout outs to her. We were talking about education today. Her mother is a former educator. So, believe it or not, Abbott Elementary is actually based on her mother's experience as a Philadelphia public school teacher. So, a lot of the stuff that you're watching it's funny, but she's not making it up. She's pulling it from her mom's experience. And so we love that she highlights education in such a cool way. Um, she's gotten so many Emmys for just doing that, doing Abbott Elementary and being a writer on Saturday Night Live and other things. So I definitely think she is definitely a Black excellence moment of the week, getting the key to the city, getting the mural at her former school in Philadelphia. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the world that's negative, and so we try to take a moment to highlight someone doing something positive in the Black community, positive Black news. That's something important that we try to also highlight on the podcast. So shout out to Quinta, shout out to Yoshi for coming through. I literally got him last minute, secured him for this episode. I was beating myself up because I was so focused on Juneteenth. I was like, wait a minute, I haven't done my bar exam episode. I don't want to wait to July where someone may not need it. People need, these tips now. So Yoshi, thank you so much for coming on. Is it the lawschoolmentorprogram.com?
It's just lawschoolmentor.com.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Great. So that's where you can find him. And obviously you can find him there on Instagram. And as always, we're rooting for everyone Black. Take care, everyone.